The sky above Maple Crest Estate glowed with the soft radiance of a late afternoon sun, gilding the tall hedges and manicured gardens with a gentle light. A curved driveway led from the ornate gate to the main house, a mansion of pale limestone topped with a greenish patina roof. Towering maple trees sprinkled the lawn with dappled shadows, while a central fountain burbled softly near the entrance. This estate was widely known among the townsfolk for its grandeur, and for the wealthy man who owned it, Edmund Fairchild, a man born into luxury, famed for his cold, haughty demeanor. On the steps of this imposing residence, Edmund stood with a posture that bespoke unwavering confidence. He wore a pale linen suit, a cane in one hand for no other reason than to emphasize his aristocratic posture. His gray hair, swept back from a chiseled face, combined with calculating eyes, gave him the air of someone who believed the world was his to command. Down by the entrance gate, a figure approached, out of place in these surroundings. It was a boy of about 14, a poor black youth whose ragged trousers and worn-out sneakers set him apart from the estate's polished ambiance. Nathan clutched a small bundle containing all his worldly possessions, an extra threadbare shirt, a plastic water bottle, and a dog-eared novel that offered him brief escapes from his bleak reality. Dust clung to Nathan's cheeks and brow, evidence of a long journey across unpaved roads. A quiver of resolve mixed with hesitation seized him as he gazed up at the iron gate. Beyond it lay the mansion's circular driveway, flower beds brimming with color, and that formidable house shimmering under the sun. He had heard rumors that sometimes this estate hired temporary workers, kitchen assistants, stable cleaners, or gardeners. Desperate for any chance to earn a few coins or find a roof for the night, he mustered courage and stepped closer. From his vantage on the mansion's steps, Edmund Fairchild had already taken note of the newcomer. He disliked unannounced visitors, especially those he deemed unworthy of his presence. A scowl crossed his face. He tapped his cane on the marble step, signaling one of the household staff, an older man in a simple black uniform. The staffer hurried down to see who approached, but by the time he reached the gate, Edmund had decided to address the situation himself. He marched forward, posture upright, eyes flashing with irritation, as he arrived near the property's main iron gate. It stood halfway open, an invitation only for those he favored, but the boy was definitely not among them. Nathan, despite exhaustion, kept his head high. There was fear in his eyes, yes, but also a flicker of pride. He whispered politely through the bars, "Good afternoon. I heard there might be some work available. I can do yard work, or clean the stables, or help in the kitchen. He paused, swallowing. I need a place to stay for a short while, or at least some honest wages. Edmund's lip curled as he inspected the boy's dusty clothes. After a beat of silence, he scoffed, I can't imagine what nonsense you've heard. As you can see, this isn't a charity house. His voice carried the sharp edge of class disdain. We have staff, all properly hired. You, he glanced up and down, are not the sort I employ. He emphasized the final words, letting them sting. The staff member behind Edmund averted his eyes, not daring to contradict his master. Nathan forced out a polite tone, though humiliation gnawed inside him. I can learn fast, sir. I'll do anything you need, just for a meal or a little money. He lowered his gaze, hoping humility might persuade the man. My mother passed away recently, and I have nowhere else to go. A flicker of something, discomfort or possibly contempt, crossed Edmund's face. He responded coldly, tragic, but not my concern. I don't take in strays. He waved his cane dismissively. "You don't belong here. Now get off my property before I call the authorities." Nathan's chest tightened. He had expected refusal, but not such a blatant, demeaning brush-off. "Please," he insisted, voice trembling. "I'm not asking for charity. I'll work for it. I just need a chance." Edmund shook his head, a derisive laugh escaping him. "Look around, boy. Do you think a place like Maple Crest hires random urchins from the roadside? I've no interest in your sob story." Then, leaning forward, he dropped his voice to a near snarl. "I won't repeat myself. Leave now." With that, he turned on his heel, walking back toward the house, cane striking the ground in methodical taps. The staff member lingered, an apologetic flicker in his eyes, then followed his master, leaving Nathan in the swirl of dust and wounded pride. The boy's cheeks flushed with a mix of sorrow and anger. He clutched the gate's iron bars. Briefly, it crossed his mind to shout that he'd prove the man wrong, but a wave of helplessness overcame him. He was only a child, homeless, poor, and singled out by prejudice. Head bowed, he trudged away from Maple Crest Estate, steps heavy. Behind him, the fountain sparkled in the sunlight, a mocking testament to a luxury unattainable. The memory of Edmund's scornful look burned into Nathan's memory, fueling an emerging determination. He would not stay powerless forever. The following days found Nathan wandering roads, sleeping in barns or behind taverns, occasionally taking small jobs, washing dishes, sweeping, carrying supplies. Whenever he felt like giving up, he remembered the humiliation at Maple Crest. He let that bitterness mold into ambition. If being poor and black meant doors slammed in his face, he vowed he would someday be the one opening doors for himself, no longer reliant on men like Edmund. A faint dream formed, to rise so high that even the Harringtons or Fairchilds of the world would have to acknowledge him. That dream was more than mere fantasy. It was a survival mechanism in a system rigged against him. Over time, his resourcefulness caught the eye of a traveling merchant named Mrs. Townsend, who saw how quickly he calculated sums when weighing produce. She offered to teach him basics of trade and barter in exchange for help hauling goods to market. With each town, Nathan gleaned new lessons about pricing, profit margins, supply and demand. He took note of farmers who needed loans, shopkeepers who needed better distribution. Quietly, he stored each lesson away, forging a makeshift education from real-world experiences. He read battered books on economics, borrowed from traveling scholars, and studied old newspapers found in dusty corners. Night after night, he told himself, "I'll show them. I'll show that man who spat on me." Years swept by. Nathan, now in his 20s, had reshaped his fate through unyielding perseverance. By forging alliances, investing modest earnings, and trading in farmland or small properties, he amassed a portfolio that, though modest, kept growing. Each success reinforced his belief in turning adversity into opportunity. If a business owner needed capital, Nathan offered small loans at fair terms, ensuring loyalty and stable returns. Over time, his name spread among the region's budding entrepreneurs. Nathan Jacobs, a self-taught investor, known for fairness and insight. Few realized he was the same ragged boy once cast aside at Maple Crest. Meanwhile, Edmund Fairchild maintained his regal lifestyle, but cracks formed in the foundation of his wealth. A series of poor decisions, ill-advised speculation, lavish parties that devoured funds, drained the coffers. The world changed, markets dipped, and he stubbornly clung to old illusions. He mortgaged parts of the estate to cover debts, ignoring warnings from advisors. Eventually, he found himself cornered. Maple Crest Estate risked foreclosure. For a man who prided himself on lineage and opulence, the notion of losing the ancestral mansion was unthinkable. But reality bore down. As rumors spread that Maple Crest might be sold, townspeople gossiped with a mix of schadenfreude and pity. Some recalled Edmund's rude behavior. Others wondered who might buy such a grand estate now that the economy faltered. Word emerged that an anonymous buyer had shown interest, rumored to pay the full asking price in cash. The staff, uncertain about their futures, waited anxiously. All they knew was that the sale was happening swiftly, with a final closing scheduled within weeks. On a crisp autumn morning, under a sky of pale gold, the final day dawned for Edmund at Maple Crest. He stood on the porch, this time without arrogance. His eyes roamed the withered gardens, remembering how once they bloomed under meticulous care. With him was a single suitcase packed with personal items. No servants rushed to his side. He had laid off nearly all of them. The fountain lay silent, algae-riddled, reflecting how the estate's grandeur had tarnished. A pang of regret twisted in his gut. For the first time, he might have considered how easily fortune can slip away when mismanaged. A black sedan approached, rolling quietly along the dusty driveway. Edmund felt a strange dread. Sure, this was the new owner come to claim the house. The car halted near the steps. The driver stepped out first, then opened the passenger door. From within emerged a tall man in a well-fitted navy suit, carrying a leather portfolio. His complexion was dark, his hair cropped, and his movements exuded calm authority. He glanced around Maple Crest with thoughtful eyes, as though reacquainting himself with a place from the past. Slowly, he turned to face Edmund. Upon seeing the man's face, Edmund's breath caught. Something about that face stirred a half-forgotten memory. The newcomer walked forward, posture poised. The staffers who remained gaped. The new owner was a black man. Edmund's cheeks reddened, torn between shock and confusion. The stranger paused at the base of the porch steps, meeting Edmund's stare. Then the man quietly announced, "Mr. Fairchild, my name is Nathan Jacobs. I believe we have business to finalize today." He extended a hand in formal greeting. The shock fully hit Edmund in that instant. A silent recollection of that ragged boy from so many years ago flashed in his mind. The dusty clothes, the timid voice, the plea for a job. This man had the same eyes, the same determined set of the jaw. "You," Edmund stuttered. "It can't be. You're that boy?" The confusion made him pale. This is impossible." Nathan's lips curved slightly, though not triumphantly. He responded evenly, "Yes. Years ago, I came here seeking work, and you turned me away. It was a defining moment in my life. But let's not dwell on the past. I'm here, ready to sign the papers, to assume ownership of Maple Crest Estate." The staffers, overhearing, gasped or whispered, their wide eyes reflecting the magnitude of the reversal. Edmund nearly staggered, heart pounding. The man he once humiliated was about to own the manor that symbolized centuries of the Fairchild family's pride. The official from the bank approached with documents, flanked by local witnesses. "We can proceed in the study," he suggested. Edmund, still reeling, wordlessly led them inside. The once grand foyer felt eerie. The checkered marble floor was dusty, the walls half stripped of paintings sold off to pay debts. In the old study, the curtains hung limp over tall windows. A large wooden desk near the fireplace functioned as the final station for this exchange. They all gathered around the desk. The bank official laid out the final deed transfer. Nathan Jacobs calmly produced a cashier's check for the agreed sum, a figure that would clear Edmund's outstanding mortgage and debts. The official nodded with approval, exchanging polite remarks with Nathan about how swift this sale had been arranged. Edmund hovered near the desk, face ashen. In a matter of minutes, decades of his family's legacy would slip from his control. Meanwhile, Nathan remained collected, signing each document with purposeful strokes of the pen. At last, the official passed the deed to Nathan. "Congratulations, Mr. Jacobs," he said. "Maple Crest Estate is now yours." The staff in the study clapped timidly. Edmund Fairchild released a trembling exhale, realizing he was no longer the master of this house. He cast a hollow glance at Nathan. "It's done, then," he murmured. Nathan turned to face him fully. Their eyes locked, recalling that day a decade prior when their roles were reversed. A tide of emotion tugged at Nathan, but he kept his voice measured. "I take no pleasure in your misfortune, Mr. Fairchild, but life has a way of changing circumstances." He paused, letting the tension breathe. "I wish we'd met under different terms originally." For a moment, Edmund's pride warred with desperation. He looked around the study, remembering grand parties, the nights he felt untouchable. Then he quietly asked, What do you intend to do with the house?" The question carried faint hope that maybe he'd remain as some caretaker or tenant, or possibly he just wanted to glean the fate of his ancestral home. Nathan studied the high ceiling. "I have plans to renovate, to modernize certain wings, and open other sections for community projects. I want to do better than simply flaunting wealth." He gave Edmund a pointed glance. "I learned early on how it feels to be turned away. Perhaps this place can stand for something else now. Opportunity, not exclusion." Edmund's shoulders sagged, recognition of how the house's spirit would be reborn under new leadership. The notion that a black man, once so belittled, now championed a different ethos weighed heavily on him. He managed, "You speak with generosity. Despite how I once treated you, you're not exacting revenge. Why?" Nathan inhaled slowly. "Because revenge would keep me bound to bitterness. I prefer to shape a new path, one that affirms my mother's lessons about dignity. She taught me to never sink to the level of those who belittle others." His words carried calm but powerful conviction. A hush enveloped them. The bank official concluded final signatures, leaving a small flurry of paperwork for Nathan's records. Some staff members discreetly offered to show him around, as he was now the rightful owner. Meanwhile, Edmund, having nowhere to go, lingered awkwardly. The men in suits from the bank parted with polite nods. The staff looked to Nathan for instructions, uncertain whether Harrington was to be ejected immediately. Sensing the tension, Nathan cleared his throat. "Mr. Fairchild, Edmund, I can allow you a short while to gather your things. If you need lodging for a few days, there's a small guest room in the east wing not slated for renovation immediately. You can stay until you find alternative accommodations." Edmund blinked, stunned by the generosity. You do that?" A tremor ran through his voice. He recalled, with shame, how he'd refused even a day's shelter to the boy years ago. Now, roles reversed, he felt the irony keenly. He rubbed his temple, expression a swirl of regret and weary gratitude. I thank you," he said, forcing the words out. Nathan nodded, the final flicker of the pen sealing not just a legal transaction, but also a moral conclusion to their earlier clash. "I'd never want to replicate the cruelty I experienced," he said quietly. With that, the matter was settled. Edmund's last trunk of belongings was moved to the modest guest room. Staff escorted him. Nathan, now alone in the study, took a measured breath, letting the magnitude of the moment wash over him. A few hours later, the sun dipped toward the horizon, painting Maple Crest Estate in golden light. The house's corners, once symbols of Harrington's pride, glowed differently now, an invitation rather than a warning. Staff members approached Nathan hesitantly, some asking if they could remain employed. Others, uncertain of his plans, offered to resign. Nathan calmly assured them that those who wished to continue could do so, provided they were open to new ways of managing the estate. They responded with a mixture of relief and curiosity. Perhaps a kinder regime awaited them. Strolling through corridors, Nathan found old portraits, antique furniture, and dusty relics testifying to centuries of Harrington pomp. He decided not to discard them all. Instead, he'd preserve some as historical artifacts, a reminder of what power used to look like, and how it changed. In the once grand dining hall, he pictured future gatherings, not exclusive feasts, but communal dinners for neighbors, charity auctions for local schools. Yes, the transformation of Maple Crest could symbolize everything he believed in now, that success should uplift many, not just the privileged few. Over the ensuing weeks, renovations began. Builders replaced moldy window frames. Gardeners revived the overgrown hedges. Nathan personally supervised, wearing boots and casual clothes, pitching in occasionally with manual labor. Locals watched, impressed, as the mansion evolved under new stewardship. No longer intimidating, but approachable. Word spread that part of the house might house a library or a small museum dedicated to local history, ensuring that Maple Crest integrated with the broader community. The fountain in the front, once silent, gushed anew with sparkling water, symbolizing rejuvenation. Meanwhile, Edmund Fairchild stayed low profile in the East Wing, venturing out rarely. Staff treated him politely, but no longer feared him. Some whispered how he was a shell of his former self, haunted by mistakes. Others noticed him reading a lot, scanning job listings or traveling brochures, as if seeking a fresh start. One afternoon, he approached Nathan with an awkward request: help contacting certain acquaintances for potential employment. After a moment's hesitation, Nathan provided him with phone numbers and references. The staff observed this quiet act of mercy, contrasting sharply with the memory of Harrington's old arrogance. One evening, about a month after the takeover, Edmund gingerly approached Nathan in the library, formerly the Harrington family's trophy room, now reorganized with shelves of books. The sweet smell of new paint lingered. Bowing his head, Edmund said, "I mean to leave tomorrow. I found a small place in the next county near the farmland. I can do some consultancy for an old friend." His posture, once so proud, was subdued. "But before I go, I wanted to say, I am sorry, truly. I never believed I'd be the one begging for kindness in my own house. Yet you showed me more compassion than I ever showed you." Nathan closed a book he'd been reading, eyes somber. "I appreciate your apology," he said. "I hope you've learned something from all this. We each get one life, Mr. Fairchild, and using it to degrade others, it's a waste. May you find a better path." Edmund nodded, moisture gathering at the corners of his eyes. He left soon after, in the quiet dawn, carrying a small suitcase and a heart heavy with the consequences of his once impenetrable pride. In the months that followed, Maple Crest Estate emerged as a community hub. Nathan hosted open house weekends, inviting local families to stroll the gardens or enjoy small festivals. A youth scholarship fund launched in memory of his mother, providing for bright students in dire circumstances. The staff, once lukewarm, now embraced the new spirit. They saw how the estate's outward grandeur was matched by genuine goodwill. The local press covered it all, calling Nathan Jacobs a philanthropic figure who epitomized rising from rags to riches. In interviews, he maintained a calm humility, stating simply that he'd been given no choice but to build my own destiny. Sometimes, visitors asked about the prior owner. Nathan answered politely that Mr. Fairchild had moved on, wishing him well, leaving it at that. In quiet moments, Nathan would wander the same gate where he once stood as a desperate teen. The iron bars were replaced with a friendlier design, an archway overhead reading, "Opportunity grows here." He'd rest a hand on the metal, remembering the sting of that old rejection. Now the gates stood open, a symbolic reversal of the day he was barred entry. If a child ever wandered up seeking help, he would never treat them with cruelty. One warm afternoon, a small group of school kids arrived for a field trip. Nathan, stepping into the role of an informal guide, showed them the gardens, explaining how he was modernizing orchard spaces for local produce experiments. In the main foyer, they asked about the house's history. He recounted tales of old Harrington traditions, leaving out any rancor. Then a child, wide-eyed, inquired, "How did you become the owner if you weren't from a rich family?" The question hung in the air. Nathan, kneeling to the child's height, answered, "Hard work, determination, and some kindness from folks along the way. And I never let anyone tell me I wasn't worthy." The child nodded, impressed. Such moments underscored Nathan's wish to inspire. He recognized that no matter how large Maple Crest's walls or how lofty its past, each person's inner worth overshadowed birth or circumstance. Over dinner that night, with close friends, Nathan toasted to new beginnings, saying, "This house stands now as proof that even if you start with nothing, you can build a future that helps others." Rumors circulated that Edmund, in the next county, lived modestly, working as a consultant for a vineyard. Ironically, learning from scratch tasks, he once dismissed as peasant labor. Some said he'd been seen volunteering at a local soup kitchen, perhaps a private penance for his former arrogance. The details remained murky, but the metamorphosis of Maple Crest was plain for all to witness, a once exclusive mansion turned symbol of uplift. By the first anniversary of Nathan's purchase, the renovations were largely finished. The estate glowed with fresh paint, modern utilities, and curated antiques. A grand reopening was planned, inviting local dignitaries, neighbors, and philanthropic partners. Lanterns lined the driveway at dusk, illuminating the fountain now restored to its former sparkle. Rows of chairs faced a temporary stage near the porch. Nathan, wearing an elegant but simple suit, addressed a crowd of over 100. Behind him, the staff lined up, beaming. Their loyalties now lay with a master who treated them as valued colleagues. Cameras from a local news station panned across the assembly, capturing an atmosphere of hope. In his speech, Nathan shared fragments of his journey: poverty after losing his mother, the heartbreak of prejudice, the mentors who taught him business basics, the final road leading him here. He did not name Edmund explicitly, but everyone knew the subtext. What was once a fortress of arrogance, he said, can become a haven of possibility. I humbly stand here to ensure no child, no wanderer, will be dismissed at these gates. Maple Crest belongs to the future, not the past. Applause roared. Some dabbed tears, remembering how many lives were touched by the man's unwavering determination. Near the ceremony's end, a slight commotion in the driveway signaled an unexpected arrival. Edmund Fairchild, wearing a plain shirt and trousers, stepped out of a taxi, drawn by curiosity or perhaps a final longing. The crowd parted uncertainly, unsure how he might be received. Nathan, noticing, waved for him to come forward. Edmund approached the stage, shoulders hunched. An electric hush fell over the gathering. For a moment, it seemed as though old resentments might flare. Instead, Nathan offered a measured nod. The audience sensed a tension. Edmund cleared his throat, struggling for words. I see you've made this place better," he said. "I wanted to say, I realize now, the boy I cast out overcame me in every way, and you did it with dignity." Some in the crowd bristled, recalling his cruelty, yet Nathan replied calmly, "I appreciate your acknowledgement. May it stand as a lesson for us all." Then, in a remarkable gesture, he extended a handshake. Edmund, tears glinting in his eyes, accepted it. The final cameras captured that moment. The old owner, once an emblem of prejudice, clasping the hand of the new proprietor who overcame adversity. The applause that followed signaled not just delight in the reversal, but the healing that might follow. That night, as stars dotted the sky, a private gathering convened in the renovated parlor. Friends who had witnessed Nathan's journey, staff members who had gained new purpose, and local folks who championed his philanthropic mission all mingled in a spirit of celebration. Laughter and clinking glasses echoed where once only Harrington's elite soirees took place. Nathan slipped out onto the porch, seeking a moment of solitude. He gazed at the arching driveway, recollecting how he first approached with trembling hope, and was turned away. Now, the mansion's pillars glowed softly, welcoming. In that quiet moment, he felt a surge of gratitude for life's twists, for the resilience nurtured by heartbreak, and for the chance to wield wealth as a force for community good. One of his old mentors, the traveling merchant Mrs. Townsend, found him there. She smiled. "You've done wonders, son. Quite the rise from that dusty kid I met lugging crates." He chuckled warmly. "Your lessons carried me far. Without them, I might have never recognized the potential in real estate." She nodded, patting his shoulder. "I always saw the spark in you. Now the world sees it too." Finally, near midnight, as the festivities wound down, Nathan strolled the garden paths alone. Crickets chirped, and the fountain's gentle spray shimmered under a lantern glow. He recalled each painful step of his youth, the nights spent hungry, the humiliations endured, and the unwavering vow that no one's disdain would define him. The estate's tall windows glinted like eyes witnessing his victory. He had reclaimed the very place that once dismissed him, and, more importantly, repurposed its grandeur into something inclusive. In a final whisper to the silent night, he murmured, "This house isn't just mine. It's a testament to what you can achieve when you never let anyone define your worth." And so ended the saga of Maplecrest Estate's transformation, from a fortress of arrogance to a beacon of hope. All because one poor black boy, once kicked out and belittled, harnessed that hurt into an unbreakable will, returning at last to stand triumphant on the very doorstep where he'd been told to leave. A testament indeed for generations to come, that yesterday's injustice can become tomorrow's impetus for greatness,